It's now time for this month's broadcast of Learning Now TV.
Welcome to the January edition of Learning Now TV. And you might notice something strange. When I look to my left, there's no one else. I'm in the studio on my own today because Kate is in the US and we couldn't align the time zones in time for the program. So I'm afraid it's just me, and it hasn't been just me for very many years. So I'm looking forward to the power that gives me. On the show today, we've got some excellent guests, starting with John Fletcher, the AI specialist, who talks about not just how AI is affecting work, but how it's affecting all our lives, and is urging L&D to get on with it, deal with it, and start to build it into L&D workflows, as well as doing things like content speeding and content management. I also talked to Amy Bayu. She is a workforce agility specialist and explains that it's really important for the future of organizations to have effective workforce agility, particularly post-pandemic. And Kate spoke with Paul Fennick. He's a corporate learning strategist and talks to Kate about HR functions and how AI is enhancing those functions, and emphasizes the need for strong data frameworks to emphasize AI implementation and support AI implementation. And I caught up with Robin Hoyle. Usually Robin's on his own, but today I talked to him about what makes a great conference presentation. We're on the eve of World of Learning London, and Robin was reflecting on what he likes to see in a great conference and great conference speakers. And then finally, we have Rob Clark with Learning News, all the news, all the views, all the scandals emerging from the learning industry for your delectation in a short segment today. Anyway, enjoy the show.
So our next guest will be familiar to viewers of Learning Now TV. John Fletcher has graced us with his presence before. So AI strategist, futurist, always looking ahead, always pushing the boundaries. He's given me things to think about that I have turned over and over and over in my mind. Quite challenging, but we live in challenging, very interesting times. So, John, I think it's probably a year or so since we had you on last. So welcome to the show. And I guess we could start with what's new in the world at large, but I gather you have some news a little bit closer to home as well. So what's new with you?
Yeah, no. So over the last, in 24, we were really talking about a lot of conversations online were all about how do we use AI in the flow of work, how do we bring it forward? And a lot of the conversations that people were having were often theoretical. And I kind of decided to put that into practice. So I'm really excited to have joined Hemsley Frasers as their Chief Technology Officer, their CTO, with a slightly different kind of approach to being a CTO. Whilst I don't come from a traditional background of technology, what I do have is an extremely large amount of experience, knowledge, and understanding of how to utilize technology in organizations to drive performance, to drive efficiencies and productivity. So that's going to be my world now moving forward, which is going to be really, really exciting.
That is really exciting. That's really exciting. Congratulations. So congratulations to Hemsley Fraser as well. They're very lucky to have you. Obviously a name that's been around in the UK from a learning and training point of view for, I mean, as long as I've been around, which is a lot of years now. So good pedigree there. And I think, I mean, I saw you speak at Learning Live in September, and I really liked the emphasis, if I can call it that you put on performance. And can you talk to us a little bit more? Not everybody would have been at that event, and I think we've talked about that link between learning and performance for again so many years, but it doesn't always manage to translate, does it? So it's all those holy grail type of level.
Yeah, it is, but it's also, I mean, I spent 9 to 10 months in 24 really diving into the future of HR, the future of L&D, and where AI is taking us. And I don't think AI is the solution. I think it's an enabler to have the conversation, is enabler to enable us to perform. So the reason why I talk about performance, whenever we've looked at wanting to bring technology into the organization or bring an LMS or an LXP into the organization, the conversation's always been about feature sets. That's, you go look at an RFI, an RFP, it's always plastered with feature sets. And I read a book called Obvious Adams, which is about a gentleman called Oliver Adams, who was a marketer back in the early 1900s in New York. And the reason why he succeeded in his role is he had an innate ability to be able to take a step back and actually look at things in a very, very different way and ask the question, what's the obvious solution here? And when I was working with loads of clients at the start of 2024, and I read this book, I kind of did the same, and I took a step back. And something that was really interesting is all of the conversations we've been having now are all about little performance gains through AI, 10% efficiency improvement or a 15% productivity gain on this, or, we're going to be automating this process in the back of an LMS system that's going to drive improvements in speed to market or speed to deployment. And these were all really small gains versus, I think, the potential that AI offers us. And a lot of those, for me, when I took a step back and kind of looked at everything, was like, actually, we need to fundamentally redesign what we're doing and how we're doing things in order to enable the business to truly perform. The other part of this was when you start to look into some of the conversations that leadership are having. If you go look at the FTSE 100 and go look at their quarterly earning calls, it's not the CHRO that's on those calls. It's the FD and the CEO talking about finance. Unless there is a finance or cost-related element to HR, i.e. they're going through a huge transformation, or there's going to be a headcount reduction that's going to drive increase or save money in the long term. Generally, HR aren't even mentioned on those calls. More importantly, employees aren't even mentioned on those calls. So back in September, I started to explore the idea in more detail around, well, actually, what happens if we were to talk about performance? And the reason why is that if you look at the outputs of AI, a lot of it's about performance-related outputs. I would argue learning is a performance-related output as well. But knowledge retention, capability improvement, skills development are all outputs of activities that people do, that they experience. And so if we start to talk about performance in a more structured way, it's going to enable us to have the conversations going up the chain. And also, I think AI gives us facility and the ability to be able to really challenge how we are set up as a HR and L&D function moving forward, which I think is really the exciting part we're moving into the whole of this year.
Yeah, I mean, I would argue, I'd completely agree with that. And I would argue that if, learning isn't impacting performance in some way, shape or form, it's not necessarily, it doesn't have to be a direct correlation. But it can be it could be indirect in terms of, actually, I've learned about something that I'm interested in. It doesn't necessarily make me better at my job, but therefore I'm more engaged, I'm happier, and therefore I perform better, etc., etc. So I think there's both the indirect and the direct. Actually, I've done this certification, I'm therefore now better at my job because I've learned X, Y, and Z. And I would argue that with if there is no impact why are we doing it? And so I often think, well, why don't we take that step back more? And it comes back to, I guess, what we've talked about a lot in L&D over the years. It's getting away from that order taking from the business or training to tick a box, not even necessarily compliance box, but just, oh, well, we've got this problem, we'll throw this at it without ever knowing if it's any good. My colleague always says, like, feedback is a gift. And like, how do we, if it's not making a difference, like, how is it helping? Why are we doing it?
Yeah, and it's a really interesting one, because I was speaking with a client recently, and they, we were talking about how they engage with their business, and they goes, "Oh, we go and identify the problem statement." And I kind of challenged straight off the bat, because by going to identify a problem statement implies that there's a solution that you can fix. And we know that that's not the case, because there are a multitude of things in an organization that sit outside of the remit of learning development that will need to fix in order to fix the problem that you're often getting told about. And so my question back to them is, well, why don't you go and have the conversation and say, well, what performance metrics are you trying to improve? And I think with L&D, we're really honest with ourselves. The compliance conformance element absolutely needs to stay separate out of this, because some of it's regulatory and some of it we do need to complete as part of it to make sure that from a risk and governance perspective, the organization is safe. Absolutely. But my question is what is the true value of L&D if we're not there enabling the performance of the organization? And that is, like you said, indirect and direct kind of outputs. And so I think we just need to think about things in a different way, and the conversations we're having back into the business, and start challenging the business to be able to say, well, okay, you want to go off and deploy leadership training. Why? What value is that going to add to the organization? What performance is that going to enhance? Or what performance metrics do you want to see shifted off the back of it? Because otherwise, I would question the purpose of it becomes more blurred, which means that we end up then getting all of the current data that we get in L&D around number of completion rates, number of views and all of that. And we don't actually see any real movement to the performance of the business. And so, yeah, for me, it's starting the conversation to enable us to start thinking differently. And there's some, we talk about performance consulting and business partnering, and I think really good steps to start that journey.
Yeah. And on that sort of trajectory of thinking differently, reimagining, I'd love to just pull in again some of your thinking around AI, because it feels like we're all strapped in to this roller coaster, and whether we're ready or not, and things are moving. And there's something there for me that was, again, triggered by something that you said to me earlier this year around not missing a trick and not missing the opportunity to rethink what we do as a profession, as an industry, rather than just automating or speeding up what we've always done. Because my sort of thinking on this is, taken from, is it a book? What got us here won't get us there. And I would love to just unpick that a little bit more with you, because it's something that I think about a lot, and I see these, sort of tenuous Gen AI solutions which aren't really making the most of that opportunity to reimagine things.
Yeah. So when I first started to look at generative AI at the back end of 2019, way before ChatGPT got released to the world in November 22, I started to look at how we actually apply this in HR and L&D and talent and across the board. And for me, one of the biggest things that I needed to get my head around, I guess, to get over, was this notion that we can bring AI into what we always do. And I think it's such a fundamental technology to society, it's in phones, Apple Intelligence, have just launched, Samsung have got theirs. Every piece of technology now is coming out with some form of AI. It's being brought into our daily lives. And when I started to think about things in a very different disguise and actually said, okay, well, let's remove the notion of HR, remove the notion of L&D out of the equation, remove every connotation that we had about how things should be done. And we kind of said, well, what do we actually want to do with this technology to enable employees and their teams and their functions to support, to enable leaders to lead? You then started to kind of realize that you have to scrap what we are thinking around things that we currently do. The individual tasks, I think there's a lot of tasks that we do. We need to segregate those into, actually, is this task going to be automated or is it going to be augmented by AI? And then we need to kind of roll it up and go, well, okay, well, how does this now sit in the future organization? Where does this sit in the future organization? I think, unfortunately, L&D individuals are unable to go on that journey, not because they don't want to, but because they are so engrossed in their individual activities they're doing on a day in, day out basis that they're not necessarily sure where to start or where to progress through. And I think with AI, it's not so much of a L&D challenge. I think this is an organizational challenge.
What is that one recommendation or something that people stuck in the grind of the day to day could maybe do to start taking that step back and starting that process of reimagining what we do?
I think for me, it's coming out of the bubble of AI, taking a step back and actually going, okay, let me look at the tasks that we're doing, what skills and capabilities and behaviors I need to deliver those tasks, what technology I can use to enable me to deliver those tasks more effectively. And by that, it might be a situation that actually one of those tasks will be automated by AI. And you go and put it into a bucket, and when the conversation then gets arise from your bosses and the leadership within an organization that say, you know, how can we augment or automate your job? You've already got it kind of worked out. But for me, it's starting off with an activity and a task and working out what skills, what capabilities, what behaviors do I need to be able to deliver that? What technology do I then need to be able to use to be able to deliver that? AI might be one of the solutions. It's not the solution. It's only a slice of the cake. And then so, okay, well, if there is a task that actually can be automated, then go and put it in the automation bucket and wait for the organization to come and have the conversation. And until they do, continue to do what you always do, which is often deliver brilliant things.
Love that. Love ending on a positive note. I love that sort of think small to think big. John, congratulations on the new role. Look forward to, all the great things that you and Hamzy Fraser will be doing in 2025 and beyond. And thank you for taking the time to come on the show.
My pleasure. And thank you for having me.
I've met Annie Bayo in many places around the world, but I've never had the privilege, I think, to interview her on Learning Now TV. So welcome, Annie. It's really lovely to see you again.
Hi, Nigel. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm thrilled to be here.
Great. So, Annie, you are the International Workforce Agility Officer for Cornerstone On Demand. I would love to know, what does an International Workforce Agility Officer do? What is workforce agility and how do you encourage it, develop it, or whatever you do with it? Tell me about it.
Yeah, it's actually a very fancy title for something that is quite easy to understand. Workforce agility and an organization's ability to be agile, not only in its workforce, but it's in its ways of working, its processes, its underlying philosophy. All of that kind of falls under the new wave of what CEOs are looking for. And they are looking for agility, mainly because we're still living the effects of the pandemic. And during the pandemic, we saw that companies that lacked agility, that lacked the ability to pivot or to adjust their strategy on a dime, were the ones that were the least successful in managing change. And so I think the one thing that we saw was change is the constant. And so the overwhelming desire for organizations now to not only be extremely efficient, but also to be extremely agile, that caused a rise and an understanding at Cornerstone that our clients were looking for solutions for HR to be more agile and help organizations to create that workforce agility. And so my role at Cornerstone is really to promote, educate, and focus on the conduit, the major conduit for obtaining workforce agility, which is skills-based organizations. And so
you're bridging across helping skills-based organizations develop, and in doing that, you're increasing agility and you're increasing workforce agility. Is that basically true? Is that you believe there's that absolute solid bond between those two ideas?
yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because I was in Geneva at a Galaxy event for Cornerstone just very recently, and the number one question is, what is the relationship between workforce agility and skills-based organizations? And I have to say, I think that workforce agility is a kind of the goal state. This is what we are trying to achieve. It's our objective, right? And skills-based organization is the underlying methodology. So skills-based organizations, or Nestle put it really nicely, they call it skills-based operating models. That means that they use skills to inform HR decisions across the HR value chain. Skills-based organizations is simply how do we, using skills as the primary currency, track the redesign processes that are anchored on skills. And this, for example, very simply is, skills-based performance, skills-based reward, skills-based development. All of the centers of expertise in HR are actually impacted and can benefit from skills-based operating models.
And if you do that, you've got to change the organization. You can't just say to people, you're going to have to adapt. You're going to have to say to organizations, you're going to have to rethink the way you work. Hence, the ability to cut out bureaucracy, cut out unnecessary procedures, and cut out systems that don't work. And that in itself will lead to increased agility. So there's a process going on, built at the core of it, skills-based organization. The output at the end of it is agility. Is that a fair statement?
You hit it right on the nose. And in fact, we can put in any tool that's agile and that would help you to, have better skills data so you can make those data-driven decisions around mobility, around how to develop, around how to reward, around who to hire. But if culturally, you're not changing your mindset on this, any kind of transformation towards skills-based organizations will probably fail or take a lot longer, because it's first a mindset, and then the tools and the processes come and support that new kind of growth and agile mentality.
It's a mindset and a willingness to accept that things have to change on a very serious way. You can't just, I would argue, you can't tinker around the edges with this. This is big stuff. And therefore you need the right mindset to be able to take be willing to take the risks, some risks, and to take the opportunities that it's going to throw at organizations. So you're the sort of spokesperson. You're out there lobbying, eulogizing, and being enthusiastic about this journey. And then I guess behind you are some of the tools that Cornerstone can provide. Is that right?
Absolutely.
So you're pioneering. You're pushing at the front. And
They're
behind
also
you,
pioneering with their tools, but
yes. Well,
and it's so easy when you have really modern tools, with their, for example, just their recent acquisition of SkyHive, which is a talent intelligence tool, and, skills ontology. It was, they had the biggest data set in any other vendor in the vendor space in terms of labor market data, data to help us understand skills mapped to the roles, mapped to the need. So it's really about the supply and demand of skills, which is kind of why we talk about skills being the new currency, because being able to manage that supply and demand of skills is really critical. And so not only with internal developments at Cornerstone in their core product suites, but with newer acquisitions of these kind of forward-thinking companies, really makes it easy to evangelize because the vision of the galaxy is now complete with, kind of that kind of mentality.
Now, also, and if that isn't enough, Annie, you also have set up a company called Ardoise. You're based in Paris. It's a French word. Tell me what it means.
So Ardoise is an AI first content company, and I know what you're going to say. You're going to say the world doesn't need more content, and I absolutely agree. Especially not content that is created by AI alone with no human in the loop. Right? We know what content looks like now, even in the marketing space. It can seem soulless, right? Because it is soulless. It's created by AI. And so Ardoise is really an AI first company that leverages what we like to call hyper contextual learning. It is one step beyond adaptive learning. And it is a company that kind of solves the number one problem in digital learning today, is that the choices before have been very, very binary. Either we can make or buy, right? And more recently, we have the kind of choice to be able to curate too, right? But for the last 20, 25 years in the space of digital learning, the choice has been really binary. Either we can make content, the bespoke content is customized, it's got your branding, it's got your values, it says exactly what you need it to say, but we all know the problems around that, right? It's long to make, it's hard to scale, you're managing changes, modifications, and just the maintenance of that is really costly and painful.
And you come down the middle then. You contextualize, but without the arduous, tedious, slow pace. You can do that quickly and effectively by leveraging
Absolutely.
AI. Is that right? Yeah. So
absolutely. So and I've seen a lot of AI kind of driven companies out there creating content, and what we're seeing is that lack of contextualization, or kind of the lack of grounded pedagogical principles. It's not because you just give someone access to a chat that all of a sudden they're going to learn. Now,
they know stuff.
Learn a little bit better.
Exactly.
Ardoise, what we do is human learning hasn't changed in our lifetimes. The way humans learn, we don't evolve that quickly. Now, technology around us has helped to facilitate that, and that has evolved, but human learning hasn't. So Ardoise, we were very intentional about the name of Ardoise, which means chalkboard in French. And the reason why we chose kind of a an earlier technology in terms of how we learn is because we ground everything in principles of timeless learning principles, the way we learn today, the way humans naturally learn. We combine that with technology to bring agility actually to learning. So the theme of agility is actually everywhere in my life right now.
This is really exciting. I wish you luck, Annie. I really wish you luck, both with your career at Cornerstone as a new officer for Cornerstone, but also particularly with the company, something that you've set up that you're passionate about and that is ready to rock and roll in the world. So Annie Bayou, it's been a real pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much, and the very best with both aspects of your life. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nigel, for having me. And hopefully we'll see you on the road very, very soon in some country in the world.
This is a segment of the program I always enjoy. It's time for Learning News, presented by our good friend Rob Clark, full of interesting segments of information that we all need to know about.
What are the skills needed in a modern learning and development team? Sarah Hatton from the LPI is here with the answer. Redundancies in L&D were high in the last 2 years, but are there signs of optimism for the year ahead? The The LPI's capability map describes 30 skills needed by today's L&D teams. It's used around the world in around 100 countries, and it's been updated for 2025 with additional skills in AI, change management, and data analytics.
A number of the skills have actually still stayed the same. The advancements in technology are happening all around us, yet it's still fundamental cornerstone bread and butter of L&D teams to require skills in design, to require facilitation skills, albeit they might need to change slightly. The actual skills that they require are still very much needed. So it was really interesting for us to do this research and see that your fundamentals, your strategy and operations, absolutely still a cornerstone of your L&D department. Can the technology augment and help that? Absolutely it can, but do individuals need the human skills to really craft, to really leverage and address the needs to enhance the employee skills? Absolutely they do too. Performance and impact, I'd say, is one where, although it's been there historically, we're going to see even greater emphasis through the course of this year. But the one that has changed, we've included AI literacy. There's just such a difference in the maturity of AI literacy that we did want to include it as a skill to help people see, do you know what, it's okay if I'm near the beginning of my AI journey and I've got a lot to learn. So what does that look like? My AI fundamentals, my AI in practice. Or perhaps I'm already quite a lot further along that journey. So how can I really be leading to enhance productivity, my decision making, and just, again, that overall job performance with the use of the AI technology?
2024 proved an exceptionally challenging year for many in L&D. Static or even reduced budgets saw some projects cancelled or paused. Redundancies have slightly declined from 2023, a welcome drop, but still significant, and it's taking L&D folk up to around 6 months to find a new job. Salary satisfaction has dropped for the third consecutive year. However, promotions are up. Many more people were promoted in the last year, and the number of people in L&D with a related qualification is also up.
It's been challenging, for sure. Many people sort of say to us, how has this year panned out? And the only parallel that I would have is the kind of 2008, 2009 parallel, which I know is shocking to some people when they hear that. But essentially, look, we're talking about a challenging macroeconomic situation over the last 12 months, high inflation, 2 elections, a hangover from the redundancies at the end of 2023, particularly in the tech space, and of course AI, which has started to feed its way through the system, resulting, I think, in the learning and development context with a lot of organizations either rolling back on spend or just pausing on spend. And that has a knock-on effect to what we call the vendor community, providers of learning services, and certainly internal learning and development functions. There's also been much less movement in the job market. We're not great for us, we're the recruiters, right? But also there's some cautious optimism out there.
And that's all for January. Lots on the L&D economy this month, and there's lots more on the website, including the full interviews with each of the people on the programme today. Thank you to all of my guests, and thank you to our programme sponsor, CLO 100. We appreciate its support. And thank you for your company. See you next time. Back to Kate and Nigel.
Our next guest is a new face for Learning Now television, but he is not at all new to the world of learning. In fact, Paul Fenwick has been around for 25 years, looking at all manner of things learning tech, right from leading go-to-market and customer success at SAP, through to more recent consulting gigs, looking at all manner of things from adoption to leadership and beyond. So welcome, Paul, to LNTV. I'm really excited to have you on. We obviously met a year or so ago, and it's been really interesting to get to know you over that time and gain your perspective. It's really interesting to get you're in this interesting position at the moment where you've got like this bird's eye view of the market. So quite keen to just give your opinion on all things sort of learning technology and beyond, really, and what some of the things that you're up to at the moment.
Well, thank you very much, Kate, for the opportunity. And again, I'm a fan of what you guys do, and may not be so late to say Happy New Year to you as well. So
never too late, I don't think.
Never too late. Never too late. So 24, yes, it was an interesting year. 24, a lot of year for me. It would change personally, and now I have an opportunity looking from the outside in, and looking at other organizations. I think when you're in that position, you're a little bit freer to talk more freely, and also people will talk to you more freely. I know we spoke about Unleash, and I had an opportunity to speak and meet a lot of people on Unleash, but I think some of the themes that were spoken about there have been continuing through into 2025, and the dreaded AI word will continue to kind of be spoken about over the next while. But I think in preparing for today's call, really what I try to do is take a look and see what the perspective was outside of perhaps just L&D in general, maybe elevate it a little bit further up into the HR space, which I was heavily involved with when I was with SuccessFactors. And I think that the go-to tends to be, one of the go-tos anyway for me, would be to Gartner. And I was looking at some of the research they did, looking ahead into 2025, and it was around, what were the trends that were impacting HR leaders? And invariably, L&D typically would sit under HR. So it's going to cascade down to L&D leaders as well. And I think I know there's 2 or 3 areas that we're going to focus in on, but really taking this at a top level. For a lot of organizations, the Gartner research was saying that there's 3 main areas that are going to impact HR leaders. And one of them really relates to what are the priorities of the CEO, the MD, the people at the top of the organization. And first and foremost, it's growth. For the CEOs, it's growth through transformation. And that's going to be, I suppose, fueled by the AI conundrum for a lot of organizations in whatever vertical they're in. How does AI impact my business? How will I benefit from that? Where are the investments I need to make? But it was interesting to see that not only growth being the first priority as you'd expect, but technology and people, the workforce in general. So I think a lot of things we were doing in my old role with go-to-market in SuccessFactors, where we were having these conversations about where does HR, and particularly then L&D in HR, find themselves to be more of value to the business, particularly when it looks at workforce changes and the CEOs are looking to HR for information about skills and the abilities and capabilities of the people in their organization. Again, as they're looking towards growth, they're looking towards what the future brings in terms of new products, new services, new technologies, and what are the skills that are required around that, and what are the skills that exist currently within the current workforce. And it kind of then begs the question, is something we were talking about previously: do you build or do you buy? Do you try to acquire those skills and that those resources, the talent, those people that will effectively help with that transformation? And that's where, again, AI can help with recruiting. AI can help with learning and development, etc. But it really kind of gives this shift where HR, and by default then in terms of that, L&D becomes a valued partner with the business to really guide them as to where they should be focusing their efforts. And I think at an LPI event earlier, or during the summer last year, one of the questions were asked by one of the participants, the audience, is, do you know what's happening in your business? Do you know the pipeline for talent acquisition? Do you know the development plans? How do you build interventions and learning capabilities to address the actual needs of the business? So growth is one, knowing what the CEO is wanting to do. And in terms of, again, looking at what's happening in the market and what tends to be an annual event, is the World Economic Forum now produced just there this week their report on the workplace in 2025. But in addition to that, they launched a global skills taxonomy adoption toolkit. Bit of a mouthful. Yeah, a bit of a mouthful. But I think what they were highlighting in that is all the skills that are really highly required skills across different verticals, across different industries, like in government, like in the retail industry, aeronautics industry, whatever it might be. But I think what a lot of organizations still may be challenged with is, where do I start? And this report has outlined a roadmap for action, and they break it down into 3 very simple phases. What are your strategic priorities? So again, talking to the business. How do you embed change? How do you manage that change? How do you move from being an organization that thinks in terms solely of jobs into perhaps looking at it from a skills perspective or a capabilities perspective, or as I think John Fletcher mentioned a few months ago at an event, the performance of your people.
And having done the role that you were doing at Success Factors, can you see neatly, in theory, I suppose on paper, how AI can help with some of those adoption challenges? Because it's often the unspoken part of business transformation or technology rollouts. It's often the failure point, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think if we broaden the AI definition to, it's not just generative AI, which is very much the conversation driver at the moment, but machine learning, deep learning. So in terms of adoption, if you look at learning recommendations, that is a simple win, but a number of organizations were sometimes struggling with that because they didn't have the correct data sets in place. Now you can recommendations on historical information, but if you want to do pure skills-based learning or skills-based recommendations, you have to have frameworks in place. You have to map your content to the skills framework and whatever it might be. And in doing so, that can often take a lot of time to get that in place. And it's not just for learning, because that framework, those models have an application in your recruiting, your talent acquisition area, your talent development, your internal mobility. So learning, for example, extends beyond, let's say, the traditional technology of delivering it in LMS. Is that a point of need? It's through your talent programs where you have recommendations of learning that will allow you to develop the skills for the career that you want to do or the future role. So it ties into career pathing. So I think while a number of vendors have different flavors of this, in fact, I used ChatGPT last night to ask a question. How many vendors out there in the UK offer AI capabilities? And it named 4 I'd never heard of. Now, I then asked the question, I made a statement, I've never heard of these before. And it corrected the assumptions and gave me a list of organizations we're all very familiar with that you work in, that I've worked in, and others. And it gave a list of all these capabilities. And the type of things it talked about were very commonplace. Career pathing, course recommendations, adaptive learning, content recommendations, predictive analytics, etc., etc. Those themes have been around for a long, long time, and some have adopted them quite well and some haven't. But I think with the advent of this skills conversation, it needs to be done in a different way, and you need to get the groundings right and your data right. But I think these AI tools, as they come embedded into products, because that's an element to it as well, will make this a lot easier. For example, I was talking to a company late in the summer, and they have built into their authoring tool an AI capability to allow, let's say, SMEs to build content, but instead of making it up as they go along, the AI prompts them based on instruction design best practice. So this company built a model. Here's the best practice around ID. And if a non-ID person is building content in the tool, it will prompt them and say, you might consider this intervention at this point. But overall, one of the points I made earlier on is that just because you have the technology and it allows you to maybe build faster, create video, create audio, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to improve the learning outcomes. we talked about leadership. Yeah, yeah. We talked about leadership development earlier on, and one of the things that is in some of the studies is that, again from Gartner, is that with leadership and development, some methods, traditional methods, are still continuing. I spoke to somebody earlier on today. We're talking about classroom-based and coaching-based opportunities, but it was face-to-face. Now, that's great and that works really well, but how do you continue that conversation? How do you have a social element to that? But how do you scale it up where it's continuingly available to somebody, where a person isn't there, but now I'm seeing the likes of Degreed and Cornerstone and others and Skillsoft developing skills assessment tools or coaching and mentoring tools that are AI driven, that may have an avatar or an online mentor, or even through a digital assistant, but it's personalized and it's providing help to a person at a point of need, and that can be embedded in a broader leadership development program. So yeah, there's lots of ways we can rethink how we use the technology using the tools available to us.
Well, I mean, I love all of that. I love the takeaways. I think there's so much value in there for everybody. We will share the links for the Gartner report and the World Economic Report. We'll also share the links to Paul's LinkedIn, because as you can see, is an absolute wealth of knowledge. And I leave every conversation that I have with him a little bit smarter, just as I'm sure you will today as well. So Paul, thank you very much for your time and for joining us on LNTV, and come back and see us again soon.
A pleasure. Thanks very much, Kate, and speak soon.
It is my huge pleasure to be talking to Robin Hoyle again. Robin has been on this program many times. He's made a solo contribution for month after month after month, which was beyond anything that anyone could reasonably respect to another human being. So thank you for everything that you've done, Robin. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about you as chair of World of Learning Conference, which is fast coming up, and as the international expert, the head of learning innovation at Husthwaite Global, your company. So you've got a day job and you've also got a side hustle, but we're focusing on the side hustle, which is World of Learning. So Robin, first question: for you, what does good conference input look like?
I think the key for me is that the audience actually get something from it which they can then go and do. So I think one of the challenges with a lot of conference inputs is that they talk about what people have done, and it raises as many questions as it asks, as it answers, in terms of people scratching their head going, well, yeah, I understand how they've done it because they've got, a multi-million-dollar budget and they've got loads of people and they've got unlimited resources, as much as makes no difference. And here I am working with my learning and development team of 2, one of whom is part-time and the other one is me. And how am I going to do that? And so understanding the audience as needs to get some value from this, and they need to get some value from this quickly. So it really comes down to, what can I go and do if what you have achieved, what you are talking about, what you are trying to get people to do resonates? What do I do, not in 6 months' time, in 10 months' time, in a year's time, when I've managed to get the budget and the price of the technology has come down, but what do I do tomorrow? And a good conference input for me gives me some real pointers to, you can do this too, and here's how you start. And that stuff is kind of really valuable, and you can see from the audience that's what they get from it, and that's what they want, because there's a buzz around the place when the room empties and there's a small queue at the front of the conference speakers lectern while the poor devil's trying to pack their laptop up and get off the stage to the next thing and have another cup of coffee, please. That's all happening. It's that stuff happens because people go, yeah, that really resonated with me, and I suppose what starts at that is an understanding of who the audience is, and that's vitally important, really important.
Yes, I call it, Robin, doing field work, and I've never for a long time just walked into an audience glanced at them and then started speaking. And so many people do. They don't spend 1 second taking into account the people in front of them. And it's very easy. You can ask a couple of questions. You can talk to people individually or collectively. They'll give you basic feedback. And that feedback I find absolutely invaluable. And also just to ask people what makes sense, what they want more clarified. But that starting point, I always do that. This is if this is so big, this is a journey. But hey, tomorrow you can do this, and therefore you're being helpful. And so many people, it's almost like a conference presentation is about them. It's not about the audience, but the people who actually paid for you to be there are sitting in front of you. Ignore them at your peril. Ignore them at your
Exactly
peril.
so, and that thing about not being about them, one of the things that we tell people when in the other side, which is not World of Learning, although I've mentioned it World of Learning as well, is that most audiences are not interested in you. And they're much more interested in their problems, their opportunities, their stories, their issues, the things that they've got to deal with, and they're looking for you to provide some kind of insight, something which sends a light bulb off in their heads, something which gets them excited enough and energized and enthusiastic to go and try something which they'd never considered before.
Yeah. And justifies their investment, justifies the fact they've made the effort, paid the money, turned up on the doorstep.
Exactly. And let's be honest, it's not inexpensive to go to conferences, and that opportunity to really gain some benefit from it, to think about not just the chance to network with other people in the audience, and not just a chance to say I was there, and not just a chance to have some selfies posted on your LinkedIn about who you saw at the conference, but actually to gain something which says I can do something with this. That's really important. And that idea of understanding the audience might be a generic thing, but each conference, it seems to me, has its own personality. So if I'm speaking at conference A, it's different from conference B, which is different from conference C. And therefore, I take some time to find out, well, how is it different? And the good organizers will help you with that. The people who are setting the conference up, I hope, I try and speak to every speaker on our conference twice a year. Just to say, this is what's happening, this is who they are, this is what we're looking for, these are who, and I don't get that from other conferences, I think, but it's also because we really want to deliver that value. And what really ticks me off is when people go, yeah, well, I've done this presentation 17 times at different conferences around Europe and the US, and I kind of go, oh God. That this is I'm not hiring you to do your act. I'm hiring you to generate some value, and that for me is the real value for this process. But I think it's also where, and this is important, where the speakers get more from it as well, because for me, a lot of the speakers who speak at World of Learning are doing so out of the goodness of their own heart. They're doing it for a free ticket to the conference and the chance to be there, and actually. That is, we ignore that at our peril. So we're actually saying to people, you will get more value from your experience if you give people pointers about what they can do, and then they can come and talk to you in more detail about it. And you know what? Those conversations will add a different insight and perspective on your practice, on what you're doing, the things that you might not have considered. So there is a genuine two-way sharing. Once it's not just about, the Robin Hoyle or the Nigel Payne show.
How do you prepare for a conference then?
I think the first thing is just to be, and this is a kind of continuous thing, which is that I'm fortunate in that my day job involves looking at trends, looking at what's going on in the learning and development world, and just seeing whether or not there are areas of applicability to the work that I do, day to day, and my colleagues do day to day. So I'm fortunate in that part of my job is to be scanning the market, scanning L&D and what's going on. And I think then the other preparation is to say, okay, so which of these bits have got evidence which backs it up? Which of these bits can I actually point to a piece of research or some kind of support for why this will work? So it might not be that particular approach is fully researched and has been documented in various academic papers and all the rest of it. But it may be that it's drawing from some of those papers and some of those things that have been researched, and you can see how this is a development or a movement on. So first thing is, what's research? What can I talk about where I can say, actually, don't just take my word for it. Here's some other stuff, and you can look that up too. Oh, and by the way, here are the links. Here are the citations. Again, another thing that annoys the hell out of me is research has found. What research? When? With whom? You know? And if I have another person talking to me about growth mindset who doesn't understand that Carol Dweck's work was done with 3-year-olds, I am going to actually start to strike people and run amok. And I think that idea of just quantifying, qualifying the research that is being referenced, I have no problem with people referencing surveys and things that where they've looked at sentiment within the market. That's valuable, and in many cases perception is more important than fact. But it's a survey which was self-reported by an audience of people who were sufficiently interested to spend 15 minutes filling in your questionnaire. That is not a representative sample of the workforce or the world or even an individual organization. So, we've got to take even the things that we think, oh yeah, that's useful. We've got to take all that stuff with a pinch of salt. I'm reminded of a phrase that I've used very often, and it was a 19th century social philosopher called Andrew Lang, and he said, he uses statistics like a drunken man uses a lamppost, for support rather than illumination. And I thought that is absolutely on the money. The number of people who say, here are some statistics which back up what I've just told you, whether or not they're good statistics, bad statistics, doesn't matter, backs up what I've just told you. That's not learning from research. That's cherry picking the research to support your argument.
It's not learning from data either, and you can't be data centric and confident that you've got something to back it up unless you take that approach. You look at the data and tell you what it tells you, not look selectively to what backs you up. So, world of learning. What are you looking forward to in February? Tell me about it.
Well, I've got to admit I am pumped because there's two of my all-time heroes on alongside you as well, Nigel.
Thank you very much, Ron. I was just going to ask.
Two of my long-time heroes. So John Amici is doing the keynote on the first day, and he has a really particular viewpoint on the world, which is just one of these guys who will say, look at this, what do you think about this? Here's what I think. And I rarely disagree with what he said. He just gets to the nub of things, and he's a great communicator. So I'm really looking forward to him. We've also got, and this is not on the conference actually, this is part of the exhibition, so this is free to anybody who comes, Kate Adie being interviewed by Kathy Hoy. And I don't know if you've ever heard Kate Adie talk about her life, talk about her career, talk about where she came from in Sunderland and the experience that she had growing up and working within the BBC around the world. But I just think she is a phenomenal individual, and I genuinely hope that people will gain an awful lot from them. So I'm really looking forward to that.
So the very best, and enjoy your stint as a chair. Drive it forward for us, and let's have a great conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Take care.
I hope that was absorbing and interesting and provocative. We use the AI word quite a lot, but to do other things. So it's not, I think the conversation has shifted away from AI as a thing in itself. Oh, we must learn about AI. We must understand generative AI, to saying this is why AI is important because of workflows, because of the need to create more information more readily for more people faster, and so on and so forth. So it's all about agility. It's all about the modernization in a way of the workplace and the potential role that L&D plays. I can't believe that you could organize a workforce to be competent and clever with AI without any development going on. So it's really important for all those reasons. And I did enjoy talking to Robin Hoyle, just from his wise perspective on how conferences work and what makes them good and what makes them bad, and some good, serious, and useful hints and tips for anyone who's been asked to speak at a conference to make that speech more impactful and to give the individual more traction and more enduring value post-conference, of course. So I thought it was a great program. I'm glad to be part of it. There are quite a few events coming up in the next couple of months, so I want to highlight a few of them here. The first one is the earliest, 4th and 5th of February. So very soon, the World of Learning Summit will be held in London at Olympia. I'm looking forward to it. I'll be there, and I haven't been to Olympia for a long time. I'd like to see it improved and changed. We'll see. I'll note that, and we'll talk about it later, perhaps. There's also the HR and People Development Summit in Dubai on the 5th and 6th of February. Let us know if anyone's going to be there. Love to get a review of it onto Learning Now TV. Then there are the Ubiquitous Learning Awards, the LPI's Learning Awards, 13th of February in London. You can book a ticket. HR Technologies is taking place on the 23rd and 24th of April. It's in partnership with Learning Technologies. Same time, 23rd, 24th of April. They're in Excel, and the two exhibitions butt on to each other. And then there's also the Learning Technologies Conference upstairs. So thanks very much indeed for joining us. We'll see you next month. We meet again on the 27th of February 2025.